number of people that are here, and my 16-year-old daughter said today, well, at least it's not snowing. So thank you for coming out in the rain. I too am not going to take much time, and I'm going to jump right in and introduce the phenomenal people that we have sitting up here on the stage who are gracing us with their time and helping us work on this project. Emily Norton is going to speak first, and Emily is the director of the Charles River Watershed Association. After spending more than 3 years as the chapter director of the Sierra Club, and many years as a consultant on environmental policy. Emily is also a Newton City Councilor in Ward 2, the Newtonville area, and a passionate environmental advocate on projects in the city, and we're lucky to have her. When we first invited Emily to the forum, she had just started with the Charles River Watershed Association, which is why we invited her here, because that's an integral part of our project. I think it was maybe her first or her second week, and she wasn't sure. She
tried to palm us off.
She did try to palm it off on one of her associates, but no, now she's here. She's 6 months in. We're thrilled she was able to join us, and she's going to talk about the importance of the Charles River to our community and the opportunity this project presents to connect people to the river. Second up, Dan Driscoll. He's the director of the Office of Recreational Facilities Planning for the Commonwealth's Department of Conservation and Recreation, otherwise known as the DCR. Dan has passionately and persistently, important things in government, moved the region forward on creating greenways around the state. We in Newton are most thankful for the work he did to bring the Blue Heron Trail along the Charles River, connecting Newton to Boston, to the east. And Watertown and Waltham to the west. To have Dan here tonight is an honor, and no joke, the Bike Noon email listserv blew up today with people who were worried because they were not going to be able to come and wanted to know if we were taping it because they didn't want to miss Dan talking. His input on this project makes it feel more doable and real, and I'm excited for that. And last, Herb Nolan. Herb Nolan is the executive director at the Lawrence and Lillian Solomon Foundation. The Solomon Foundation champions Greater Boston's irreplaceable parks and greenways and their unique contribution to the quality of urban life. This mission to cultivate innovative projects that enhances the beauty, the utility, and the accessibility of parks and greenways. Herb brings a wealth of experience to our project and working on greenway projects just like this. He spent 25 years as a landscape architect and city planner, so he knows what he's doing. And he understands the opportunity to unlock what's here and how to get the project done, which is really critical. He is also really a phenomenal person to work with. He's on our working group, and we are really oh so fortunate to have him. I'm also going to take a moment. There are many people in this room who are also critical parts of the working group team, and if you could just stand up and quickly say your name out really loud, starting with Ted Chapman back here. Really the heart in getting this project started, and we are so fortunate to have him as a Newton resident. So, Ted, and who else is here?
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yes.
Nathan Phillips, thank you.
Yeah.
Larry Smith.
And Todd Cochran, Auburndale.
Before I sit down, I just feel, oh, somebody else? There was somebody? Okay.
Howard is here.
Oh, Howard. Yes, over here. Yes, and Catherine. Thank you, Catherine. And then I just do have to say thank you to the library and to Ellen Myers for being so easy to work with and just so professional and making this opportunity possible. So thank you again.
I want to thank the library for hosting this. Thank you so much to Alicia for organizing this. She reached out to me in September. I did try to palm this off onto my staff, and I'm very glad that didn't work, because now that I've been there 6 months, I know everything. I also want to express my gratitude to the team that's working on this project, and also DCR has been an incredible partner to the Charles River Watershed Association. I'm wearing both hats tonight. It's really fun when my worlds collide. Most of the folks who know me in this room know me as a city councilor. I get to fight for the environment day and night, so I am extremely blessed. So DCR is an incredible partner. We actually, our office is in a DCR building at the Leo J. Martin Golf Course in Westin. Folks may be familiar with that. And then also the Solomon Foundation is an incredible partner for CRWA, a supporter of CRWA. So I'm really excited to be here tonight to give this presentation. First one officially that I've done as part of it's my new job. So if I screw up, just pretend that I didn't. So what I'm going to do tonight is really just offer the trajectory of the Charles River from where it was 200, 150 years ago. How many people grew up in the area and knew the Charles River back when? Okay, so some of this is going to be familiar and you're just going to say, wow. For those who are new to the area, there's just nothing as stark as where the Charles River was for those of us who grew up when it was just literally a stinking cesspool to what it is now. And so just to demonstrate, and that's, you know, that now that we have this jewel, there's so much more that we can be doing to increase access to it for recreation. So just some basics on Charles River Watershed Association, founded in 1965, central to the cleanup of the Charles, as we're going to talk about a bit. We do river science. We have dozens of volunteer water monitors who go out once a month and help us collect water samples that we analyze. Our climate resilience work, particularly around the area of our Blue Cities initiative, which focuses particularly on land use and the things that the decisions we make related to land use that can or cannot clean the water, return water to groundwater, and how do we do our work through science, advocacy, and periodically suing people. Just some very basics on what a watershed is. It is an area of land that drains to a river, lake, or harbor. We have 28 watersheds in Massachusetts. And the Charles River watershed, I learned on the job, the Charles River starts in Hopkinton, like the marathon. Over 300 square miles. It's an 80-mile long river, 35 cities and towns in the watershed. It goes through 23 of them. And 1 million people live within the Charles River watershed. So I don't know how many people have probably heard of the term Quinnipiquin, right? We have a road and so forth. That was the original name of the Charles River by the original inhabitants of this area, the Native Americans. It means meandering, so we can, well named, right? The Massachusetts people, or the people that were here before us, they used the river for fishing, for transportation, but then with the arrival of the Europeans, literally over 90% were killed from disease. When I'm on the Charles, and those who have canoed on it or kayaked on it, there are stretches where you literally can't see any bridges, can't really hear anything, right? Anyone who knows what those parts of the Charles I mean. I sometimes like to pretend like, wow, this is what it looked like, or maybe close to it, and what it must have been like. I almost feel like I'm, you know, canoeing among ghosts. It feels sort of spiritual to me. So I like to think about, you know, who used to be here. Early Europeans put the Charles to work with 20 dams on the Charles so that they could power early industry. Those dams changed the contours of the river. Folks are familiar with the Lakes District, right? Which is a benefit now. That was as a result of dams. This is from the Newton Conservators website. It's amazing to think about now, but the Charles was really a central point of social interaction and entertainment and recreation. This is a quote from a guidebook from 1910. On a pleasant afternoon or evening, I know it's hard to read, so I'll just read out loud, not the whole thing. The water is often so densely covered that one might almost cross the stream by stepping from one canoe to another. Amazing, huh, to think about. Folks, have anyone ever heard of Norumbega Park? Did anyone ever go to Norumbega Park? Did anyone have their first kiss at Norumbega Park? All right, you don't have to answer that. But there was amazing, this was an incredible entertainment center that was put together with a profit motive to get people, it was actually a railway that built it, to get people to take the railroad into Auburndale from Boston. The Totem Pole Ballroom was a central location for big bands to visit. So it's this amazing history of recreation on the Charles. We don't really have that now. I don't know that we're going to be replicating the ballroom and everything that went down there, but there is more that we could be doing. Over time, as the pollution in the Charles got worse and as the car culture grew and people didn't need to take the train, attendance to the park declined, and it closed in the 1960s and is now the site of the Newton Marriott. In terms of the history of the pollution on the Charles, so the mills put a lot of byproducts and pollution into the Charles. The fish basically virtually disappeared. In 1875, a government report listed 43 mills from the Watertown Dam to the Boston Harbor. Imagine that, 43 mills. Just imagine the impact on the river. It was so polluted, that report said, give up on cleaning the Charles between Natick and the harbor. Just focus on the upper Charles. It's useless, it's impossible. 1955 Harper's Magazine, this writer, Bernard DeVoto, described the Charles as, quote, foul and noisome, polluted by offal and industrial wastes, scummy with oil, and unlikely to be mistaken for water. Right? In 1965, that is not color added. This was from the Medway Dye Company. Just one example of the type of pollutants that used to be regular in the Charles. This man is holding his nose because sewage used to be regularly discharged into the Charles River, especially during heavy rain. This was a fish kill. This is near the Perkins School in Watertown. Again, virtually nothing could live in the Charles. This was not uncommon. The Charles was also the site, literally, of landfills. This is the Milford dump, literally on the banks of the Charles and in the Charles. And for those who are local, the state of the Charles became not just known locally and in Massachusetts and the country, but internationally from this famous song, which it would have been totally cool to play right now. So the next time I do this presentation, I'm going to have that set up. I won't sing it for you, though. So the story of the cleanup would have taken the entire time that we have here tonight. Another time, I'd love to do that for folks. But super briefly, Conservation Law Foundation, which is a fantastic group that we still work with suing people today, sued the EPA and the state for violating the Clean Water Act, particularly around the state of Boston Harbor. And a judge determined that the city had to reduce the combined sewer overflow, that's the sewage going into the Charles, to 13.1 million gallons by 2021. Just to give you a sense of where they had to come from, that's 1988, 1.7 billion gallons of wastewater were going into the harbor. That's 2017, 30 million gallons. 30 million, still a lot, way less than where we were. It did not come cheap. It was through the creation of the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, the MWRA, the building Deer Island treatment facility. That was $3.7 billion, almost $1 billion upgrade of our combined sewer overflow, basically redoing our sewer system so that our sewer and our stormwater weren't designed to be combined when there was heavy rain. The overall cost of the Boston Harbor cleanup was about $4.5 billion. But you think about the seaport. That would have been impossible if it was a disgusting sewer mess the way it used to be. Now, people might have some issues like I do with the way the seaport was developed, but it's created a lot of value. The Boston beaches, which used to be disgusting. The Esplanade, right? The Esplanade is a jewel that we all enjoy. Wouldn't have been if there were fish kills and trash and, appliances. And the Riverside Greenway. I want to give a shout out to my predecessors who had so much to do with this, talking about being persistent and not accepting the conventional wisdom that the river could not be cleaned up. And as someone who's in elective office now, what I particularly love about this story is government can do really good things. Government can do really big things when people keep pushing and pushing. So Rita Baron, I don't know, did anyone here know her? So she lived in Newton. She was an amazing woman. I didn't get to meet her, but I've certainly read a lot about her, and she sounded amazing. Bob Zimmerman, probably some folks in the room know him. Luckily, he's still with us. In fact, he texts me every day. He's got ideas on how I should be running the place, many of which I agree with. So Bob just retired last year, but he was central to the story of the MWRA and so forth, and worked very closely with Dan. But Bob told me a story about the combined sewer overflows. There were people who argued that we shouldn't, it was too expensive to prevent the sewage from going into the river. Instead, we should just be treating it. So he put 2 glasses of water on the table, one that was clean, one had fecal matter in it that had been treated. Which would you like to drink? Which would you like to swim in? And that was an easy way to make the argument. So that's the kind of thing that Bob did. The EPA grades the Charles River every year on the amount of, on the water monitoring, on the cleanliness of the water, and 2 years in the last 5 years it's gotten an A-. So this is a huge step from where we were. Anyone know who that is? Bill Weld, jumping into the river. When I took this job, the Newton Tab asked me if I would be diving into the river. And I'm not much of a diver, so I asked my kids how it would be if I did a cannonball into the river, and they were like, yeah, Mom, don't do that. So I either won't do it or I'll be practicing my diving. I don't want to leave you to think that everything is okay, though. There are still remaining CSOs, especially in heavy rainstorms. The biggest threat, however, is not the CSO so much, but stormwater. Stormwater, which carries, I know I see my colleague Allison Leary, exactly. They carry all kinds of nasty things into the river. One of the things that runoff carries is phosphorus. Phosphorus causes the growth of invasives. Do we have any folks who like to kayak or canoe on the river? Can anyone shout out what these are? Do we have any people who are experts in invasives? Milfoil, water chestnut, and fanwort, yes. So, pass that test. Another thing that phosphorus causes is cyanobacteria. I know folks have heard that term before. Really, really nasty stuff. It's actually naturally occurring, but it's very, very dangerous. It's dangerous to aquatic life, and then this I pulled from the EPA website, just some of the things it causes to humans: abdominal pain, headache, sore throat, vomiting. Now, it sounds like one of those ads, right? Careful, this aspirin product might cause down to burning, numbness, drowsiness, incoherent speech, salivation, respiratory paralysis leading to death. At first I was like, they could have just said death, but no, paralysis before death, that's relevant. So anyway, very nasty stuff. You don't want to swim this, you don't want to drink it, it still happens. It's reason to be dealing with stormwater. Other threats: climate change, huge threat to the Charles River. If folks are familiar with the report that was just issued in November, the Northeast is going to suffer not just more increased storms on the coasts, but also heavy rain, very timely today. More flooding, more heat-related deaths. Amazingly, at least it was amazing to me to learn that the most deaths related to weather in the United States are not from storms, it's actually from heat. Evacuated, displaced populations, all of these problems exacerbated by our aging infrastructure, including water, sewer, and stormwater. And then I won't go through all of these, but just it's been helpful to me, not just in my new job, but also as I think about a city councilor and the decisions we have to make. Impermeable surface, very important for having modern lives, buildings, roads, tennis courts, etc., etc. But anytime the water cannot seep directly into the ground, it causes all sorts of additional impacts, carrying water pollutants into the river, but also fewer trees, more storms, power outages when you don't have air conditioning, when you have heat island effect. The difference with impermeable surface versus permeable surface from heat island, it's a difference of up to 22 degrees Fahrenheit at night. So imagine that you've got a storm, you don't have air conditioning, it's a difference of 22 degrees when you're already in a 90-degree summer, you're elderly, you're infirm. This is where we're headed. And so particularly as policymakers thinking about decisions related to impermeable surface, it's not just cleaning up the river, it's very much a public health and public safety issue. So the bottom line is threats remain, but we've come a long way. This is from Head of the Charles, thanks to my job. I was like to my middle son, why don't you start canoeing, or what do they call it? Rowing. So my son just started at CRI, so wanted to go to Head of the Charles, my first time ever. Can anyone know who took this picture? Any Lower Falls folks who recognize this? Ted, who is it?
Amy Oppen.
Yes, she has such beautiful photos. So I'm like, I actually emailed her today. You know, I have this new job where it's all about the Charles. Just keep sending those photos along. I love that photo. And so, it's cleaner, let's maximize access to it. Thank you.
I think it's really great to be out here. It's a great turnout. It's Always a pleasure to come back to Newton. For folks that aren't aware, I actually grew up in Newton Highlands, and so it was really just a really special thing for me to be able to work for so long and so many years on a resource area that I had grown up being told to stay away from. So it really was quite a 20-year mission. Before we talk a little bit more about the Charles and then Herb hones down into the details of the Riverside project, I wanted to take it back to a state level. This is a state map of some of the primary initiatives that are now underway, primarily in my office at the DCR, and in large part in partnership with the DOT. Mike Trepanera is here tonight from DOT. He's sort of my colleague and partner in crime in partnering on these big initiatives that require a lot of money, often federal money, to pull off these initiatives. One of the reasons why we've become so committed to these corridors, beyond the recreation, the biking, and the walking, and the running, and all the good things that happen out there, is we've realized that in a day and age when not enough people are going back outdoors and into nature, that these linear corridors are providing a respite and a place for people to go where they feel safe with their children, bike riding and going out with families. And we've found, doing all kinds of counts, that besides the swimming beaches in the summer, which I guess it's recreation, you're lying in the sun, but you could swim too, these really have become, despite the DCR owning 500,000 acres of land in the Commonwealth, we're the largest landowner in the Commonwealth. Despite all those massive woodlands and forests and wilderness areas, it's these linear corridors that are bringing the most people back outdoors to recreate. And I'm going to just talk about a few of them. Starting out in the western part of the state, that's a trail called the Ashawiltacook. It's a 12-mile corridor, which isn't that long, but it's plenty of length if you have young kids with you. And we're working with DOT right now to connect it into the urban centers of North Adams and Pittsfield. So that's a really exciting opportunity to connect two of the western urban areas into a 12-mile corridor where they can enjoy that. Down here in the south, this is called the SNET. This is also called the Blackstone River Corridor. I've been managing that for about 6 years now. We just completed a project out there where we did it's a $22 million, 3.5-mile section that includes 7 bridges and a tunnel. And if you ever can get out to Uxbridge, Blackstone, Millville area, it's just outstanding. You don't know where you are. It's the middle of wilderness. And we're working right now to connect along here down through Woonsocket, Rhode Island. And Rhode Island has actually already built the bridge into Massachusetts, and they're sort of just waiting for us. And when we get to that point, you'll be able to go all the way to Providence. We're also working on what's called the SNET. This is under design as of just a couple of weeks ago. I'm also managing that design with a partner of mine, Paul Janity, at DCR. That's going to be a 12-mile corridor that's going to connect to a trail that's in Connecticut. And when this all links up, 60 miles of that is built. It's going to be a 100-mile off-road loop, which will just be really a stunning off-road recreation amenity for the region and New England at large. Dropping down to the Cape here, right here is the Cape Cod Rail Trail. I've been working long and hard with DOT in partnership to do expansion projects on the Cape. We just last year finished a 3.5-mile extension of the 22-mile Cape Cod Rail Trail with 3 new bridges, including a bridge over the Bass River. So that area there is now all built, and we're now working on an extension in Wellfleet to take it further, and we're working with DOT to go all the way to P-Town, and there's a design to actually get back to the Sagamore Bridge, which is approaching construction drawings. So that'd be really incredible. I mean, the Cape Cod Rail Trail is one of the primary amenities now, even sometimes more so than the swimming beaches, for families to go out and experience the Cape without getting in traffic jams. So that's also coming along really well. In the urban area, I'll mention quickly before I go urban, this corridor right here is called the Mass Central Rail Trail. That really is the spine of the entire network that we've been putting a lot of energy into recently. If you haven't been out there, you can go out now. In Westin and Wayland, we just finished 4 miles of corridor. It hasn't even been officially opened yet because we still have to build a tunnel in the middle of it. That tunnel was just awarded today for $870,000 to rebuild a tunnel under a road called Conant Road. And that 4 miles is there. The next 15 miles is all under design in a partnership with Eversource Energy, who are going to bury the utility line on the next section of the corridor. And when that's done, you'll be able to go from Beaver Street in Belmont, which connects through Linden Street, and actually pick it up off the Charles River system and bike 22 miles out to Hudson and Berlin through Wayland, Sudbury, and Wayland. Really incredible corridor. We put a lot of time and energy into that one as well. And ultimately, we want to get all the way out to Northampton. That's the big vision. We're about to do a gap analysis with DOT to figure out how we can fill in some of those key missing pieces. And when that happens, it'll really be an ecotourism attraction where people can come to the city, do the urban scene, and actually take this corridor, stay in bed and breakfast, and make a full weekend of it. So it's a really important corridor for us. We just restored the Norwottuck corridor out here in Amherst and Northampton, which connects down to the Manhan Trail. And what's interesting about all these different pieces, I'm not going to cover all of them, is if you shaded the communities that have a population of over 50,000 people on this map, it's really starting to link all of those places in a way that's really stunning. In the urban core, which looks a little messy here, we've been working really hard on the Neponset system, the Mystic River system, and the Charles, to continue the Charles. On the Mystic, we're working, I'm going to go forward because it shows it better here. So we've been working on what really started a long time ago back here in the city of Newton when I first was trying to do this back in 1990 and helped to try to spearhead a lot of the greenways along the river in Waltham, Watertown, Newton, and Westin. Now what we're trying to do is take that system and connect it all the way back to the Minuteman and the Alewife, back down the Mystic River and back into Boston. This entire corridor, right now, this Greenway has been built. I manage that as well. That's the Alewife Brook Greenway, which is a 2.5-mile corridor that came out really outstanding. We're working right now, if you come up to here, there's a piece that comes past Mount Auburn Cemetery. It was a 2-mile gap, and if you know where Randy's Car Wash in Watertown is, there's a mile and corridor that dead ends at Arlington Street. We're now partnering with DOT in the construction of that critical 2-mile missing piece. It's under construction. You can go out and look at it. You can actually walk it right now because it's been shut down for the winter, the construction. So really interesting time to go see it before we finish the construction next spring. And so that piece is under construction. That gets you to the Minuteman and Alewife. And then along the Mystic, we've been restoring a lot of the pathways there. And we're working right out here with a couple of partners, the MBTA. We're about to build a trail over the MBTA bulkhead wall in Charlestown, which will end the dead end of the Mystic River. Right now it dead ends at Assembly Square. And when that piece gets in place, you'll be able to get back to Boston. That's actually, construction drawings are done. We're hoping to get that under construction this spring. I have a meeting tomorrow with Encore Resorts in an effort to try to build a new bridge over the Mystic River, which will connect the casino, or the resort, they don't like calling it a casino. It'll connect the resort over to Assembly Square, which has had a real robust, rehabilitation and resurgence, and it'll connect that. But more importantly to us, it'll connect a trail called the Northern Strand that goes all the way up to Lynn. So all of those North Shore communities that are trying to get by foot and bicycle down into the city, right now it dead ends in a way that there's no safe way to do that. That bridge will do that. Wayne Resorts has already put up $2 million in design, and we're pretty confident that they're going to end up paying for the construction of it as well, which is about $23 million. And so when that is done, there's really 3 missing pieces, all at or near or under construction. we will have one of the grand interconnected urban river corridor greenway systems in the country. Thank you. And all of your support has been key to helping a lot of that happen. So that brings it, now back to the Charles River, right? So we're honing in on the Charles. This is a map of the Charles River from Watertown Square up to Commonwealth Ave, which gets us into the beginnings of, you can see that spaghetti mess of all the challenges that Herb is helping us uncover solutions to with all the good studies that they've been doing with the consultant team. But this was the section that, of course, I spent about 20 years on trying to spearhead the development of all the greenways along that section of the corridor. Many of you know about it. When we first started out there years ago in 1990, there was 92 encroachments. You couldn't get to most of the river. So it was a pretty arduous process and task, but I'm sure most of you have been out and seen what's happened out there. The most recent piece that's happened is right here at Moody Street and Elm Street. It used to dead end at Elm Street and you'd have to kind of circumvent around to get back along the river. We actually just built an underpass under Elm Street about 1.5 years ago that connects along the Museum of Industry, and that was a really key connection, and it came out great if you've been on it or seen it. So that was a really important connection. The thing that's happening out here that is most stunning to me is just the sense of community and the mixing of people that happens. It's a place that I think builds tolerance, which, given our country right now, is really a good thing to do. I see all kinds of diversity along there. There's limited problems. There's no crime. Everybody along there is having increased property values. In Watertown and Pleasant Street, we just did a count of the development that this river corridor has spurred, and there's been over 450 new residential units developed within a 1/4 mile of the river. And they're all there because of it. We talked to the people that are doing it, the developers. There was an old commercial site on Pleasant Street in Watertown down here, and the developer came to me and he said, what do you think? I said, well, why don't you go high end? Everyone's kind of doing this hardy plank, and it's good, and it's housing, and he did, and he put in 5 townhouses. He sold all 5 of them in 2 weeks for $1 million a piece. So on the river in Watertown. So I said, wow, people are paying $1 million to live on Pleasant Street in Watertown. And I think what that really says is that as this all gets interconnected, it really has the significance of a national park. To be able to go along that river and get all the way to the Museum of Science, off-road, it's safe, there's some crossings, we've made the crossings safe. It's really a pretty incredible thing to be able to do. So this is just showing you what was out there when I first went out there in 1990. This is Pleasant Street in Watertown, where you couldn't even get along the street. There was no sidewalk. There's the river. This was a spot closer to the Lakes District, and that was one of the encroachments that was backing up to the river. This is a spot right near Russo's on the other side of the Blue Heron Bridge. So when you walk over the Blue Heron Bridge and you turn left, that's what used to be there. It was the Watertown Landfill. So when I first went out there years ago with other folks and all kinds of people, it takes a lot of people to do this. There's skilled consultant teams and the contractors and committed environmental groups and CRWA and all this long good work I did with Bob Zimmerman and Rita in my very younger days. But that's what it is today, and you would never know it. So you can transform really, sites that are really blighted into something really special. And what I learned, one of the things I learned out here that was inspiring to me is how forgiving nature is. That despite all the abuse and things we threw at this river, that if we just do the right thing and kind of give it a nudge in the right direction, the animals have come back, the wildlife comes back, the fish are coming back with all the good water quality stuff that CRWA is doing. So we're lucky. Humanity is lucky that nature can be forgiving of some of the things we've done. This is, again, Pleasant Street in Watertown, and I'm just showing here how, you start off by looking at this, you have a vision, you kind of draw that vision, you get good consultants that can design it, and then you actually implement it and fight to get the money, and every now and then you have some opponents on these projects that you have to navigate as well. This is the Blue Heron Bridge I mentioned. That's the approach coming from Newton, from the Albemarle area. If you come down Albemarle Street, you can actually access the Blue Heron Bridge that way as well. This is another footbridge in Waltham that's been really successful. And that's what it's really all about right there, right? It's people coming out, reconnecting to nature. You know, we call these, a lot of these projects, we call them bike trails, but to me they're really living corridors. They're corridors of life where people reconnect to themselves, to wildlife, maybe have an awakening. God forbid, put your cell phone down, and do things like this. And this is, here I'm just talking about, we really try also to awaken people's sense of interest with interpretation out here. So this is examples of, we have a lot of engraved boulders. We try to keep the interpretation subtle and something that will just kind of tweak an interest. So for example here, this is talking about how the mill in Watertown in the 1600s, that was actually the edge of the sluice that powered that mill. And that's enough to go, maybe I'll go research what that's about. We don't like to do a lot of big signage and just really try to keep it subtle in a place that's about the natural environment and is self-sustaining as we can design it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to her, I believe. Is that
Just the importance of having continuity in leadership and passion over years, decades. You know, that's what it takes to create progress in these resources. So we're very, very fortunate to have people like Dan, Emily, Michael right over there, other people in this room who have committed their lives to creating progress on the ground. A couple of things I want to pick up on from the presentations. One is value. The amount of money we've invested in this river is just astounding, billions of dollars. It's time to cash in on that investment by creating access to this river. And Dan mentioned something else about value. The amount of the tax revenues coming from those $1 million houses and condominiums, that is money that's flowing back to the cities. Let's cash in and let's double down on the investments in access and making sure people can get to this incredible river. We learned a lot about big connections, regional connections, but it's the small connections that are so important. The connections close to home where kids can get down and get reconnected to nature. Because right now, my daughters are hearing a heck of a lot about global warming and the melting ice caps and all the kind of bad news that's out there. Well, there's a lot of good news too, and they need to be connected to this river. That's why this is important. It's the next generation of stewards. So just want to resonate with what you guys have been talking about. And now I have to take you through the mud of the deep dive into the details of the Riverside Greenway. Okay, here we go. So, Riverside Greenways. So I'm going to go very quickly, and we can always come back at the end to pick up some of the details. I know, Ted, I'm going to be missing things. Forgive me in advance, but I'll try and get through it. As you heard from Dan, is this working? Yeah, there it is. There we are. You know, you can see the system of trails, and this is beautifully mapped out by David Lutzenheiser at MAPC, who's been tracking all the progress over time. I don't know if David's in the room or not.
Yes, he said he's in the back.
David, hi. This is some of David's work of the landline system, trying to map out all the progress that's been made and thinking ahead to the kinds of connections we'd like to see in the future. And you can see what's happening here. The Charles River reaches all the way up to this point. We have Westin, the Westin Trail System, an extraordinary system of close to 100 miles of trails you can walk on and bike on. You have the Wellesley Trail System, close to 50 miles of trails. None of these connect. This is the nexus. This is the missing piece. Why is it missing? Well, I think back in 2004, Dan ran up against the Turnpike, the I-95. There are a few small barriers in the way. So one of the reasons that the partners come in, this is a private-public partnership, is we kind of sniff out the projects, the things that have languished, that haven't moved forward, and say, well, this looks complex. We need to gather people together. Ted reached out to us through the landline, and we started to focus resources and talent since spring of last year to think through the difficult aspects of the Riverside connection. Yes. Before I take that deep dive, I have to introduce Charles Elliott yet again. Many of you know who this is. But Elliott was really the brains behind the idea of a network, a regional park network and parkway network. It was a radical idea that you'd have these connected parks through parkways, beaches, islands, the high ground. And you can see how important this was early on. That was, in his estimation, this area was one of the most beautiful areas along the Charles River. So he's one of our heroes. And this is what he was raving about back then. This is what the 5,000 canoes were experiencing. It's still there, folks. Even though there's a highway not too far away, this extraordinarily beautiful river is there. It feels a little lost, a little hidden. But the job is to reconnect to that. This is a view in Neil J. Martin Golf Course, very close to the bridge. You have to actually work your way down in order to get this view, but more people should be able to see this. Emily already touched on this, but it's extraordinary how vibrant this area was. It was a multi-use recreational facility for the entire region. Every kind of activity you could imagine was happening. Dancing, zoo animals, 5,000 canoes, the biggest swimming pool in New England was here, spring-fed. It was an extraordinary place. We met a woman at Todd's house early on when we were starting to talk about this. She remembered before the turnpike was built that she could walk from her house down into this Shangri-La of recreation and river. So that is something to think about. We're never going to have 5,000 canoes back, but can we have the variety of uses? Can we bring back some of that variety and start to serve people who don't get to the river today, don't have access to that river? We think the answer is yes, but we have to work very hard to do that, to unlock this resource. Just had to put this image up because it's so interesting. There's the boathouse right on Commonwealth Avenue. Here's the river. This is the train line up to Worcester. And the LaSalle Boathouse, if you know about it, it's right there. This is the old map from the turn of the century. You can see the boathouses, hundreds of feet long, bookending this river. That's where the thousands of canoes were stored. There's the largest pool in New England. And here's a road that we didn't even know existed. It was there. We figured it was gone because the turnpike was built. It's still there. The roadbed is still there. Pigeon Hill Road is still there. We want to reuse it as a pathway. Okay, now let's get into this. Here we are, the connections trying to be made. This is the end of the Blue Heron Trail up to Linesfield. Connections along Norumbega Road, a phenomenal shore along there. Westin, 100 miles of trails trying to come down the Westin Aqueduct. And then from Wellesley, from the south, coming up, and from the river, all of these connections trying to connect through this. It's not easy, but we're going to get into this and start to talk about it. I'm going to breeze over all of this very quickly, but this is the result of several months of work with Jacobs Engineering, the Boston BSC group, looking at a high level, conceptually, how you might accommodate a pathway, a Greenway path that really is the feel of a Greenway path. As you come in at Blue Heron Trail, you don't want to have to necessarily leave that. You want to be in a green environment. You want to have trees, you want shade, and that's what we're trying to achieve. So here we are on Commonwealth Avenue, and we are, you can see the hotel in the distance. And by the way, this image is taken from a drone. We flew a drone over this area, and at the very end, if you're not exhausted, we can run that drone video for about 4.5 minutes, and you'll see these images again. These will help you understand what you're seeing as we fly over this area. And the drone video starts way back over the Lakes District. But there's some very important issues here. Crossing Commonwealth Avenue is dangerous. If you can see through these toned areas, it splits at this point. Commonwealth is a high-speed road in two directions. That happened back when they built the Marriott Hotel 30, 40 years ago. It was probably not necessarily necessary then, not necessary today, probably. We are looking at the possibility of putting the traffic back where it used to be on Commonwealth Avenue. This would be a two-way street, just the way it was designed. The traffic numbers bear this out, and restoring the carriageways the way that they are along most of Commonwealth Avenue. We also have the opportunity here, where there are no more houses, no more driveways, of going to a greenway condition along here, and actually just having a dedicated path for cyclists and walkers, and continue on down towards the bridge. That would be a phenomenal thing, because you'd be pulling up pavement, you'd be starting to restore soft surface, and starting to improve the water quality coming into the Charles. Crossing is critical. People have talked about that in this neighborhood. It's dangerous to cross. There's no safe crossing anywhere. So that's a very important part of this initiative. Here's some ground level images. You can see Todd is staying a little too close to the curb. The cars coming flying around there. Here we're back on the carriageway. And here, this piece would remain as a carriageway. It's two ways up here, but further on it could change. This would be a shared space. Okay, you'll see these images again and again. This is a screenshot from the drone image, and you'll see this coming up again. Those red lines are the routes that we're studying. This would be the main route coming down Com Ave, a Greenway route. It would continue right up to the bridge and beyond the bridge. This bridge is actually in design. Michael, I think, is involved with that. We're very excited about the ability to get space back to accommodate pedestrians and cyclists across that bridge. There's plenty of room. And then to connect into this extraordinary system of trails. At this point, you would cross over and come up through a local street, a neighborhood, Evergreen, to get to the underpass at I-90, right up there. There's also a chance to come along with some simple hiking trails, one of which goes right past the hotel. The operators of the hotel are very supportive of that idea and want to promote that. Here's the Westin trail system is extraordinary. We went for a long walk along there a couple of weeks ago, and we're blown away. I had never been down along that shore, Norumbega Road. The Westin Aqueduct is extraordinary, and it's just a stone's throw from the Route 30 bridge. It's so close, and yet you couldn't get there without taking your life in your hands. There's got to be a way to do that. And here's the crossing. So, Michael, you're going to fix this one, right? That's on you. Good. Okay, so talk to that man right there. This is in design, and I think we're going to see some great things coming out of that. Here are members of the group looking wistfully across at the boathouse, thinking, how can we get there without getting killed? We're at the bottom of one of the local streets. And here's one of the greenways, one of the old carriage roads, which really is acting as a high-speed road. Why can't these folks be over there? We see no reason why that couldn't happen. Here's a plan view looking down at the boathouse now. This is actually from a drone image, too. And you can see what can happen. These are just tone images that are with some patterns, but what if you could just take that piece and return it to parkland? Look at the amount of room that is there. That would allow you to accommodate a whole greenway along there. You'd have rational crossings, safe crossings right here at the intersection. Always has a light. We'd have to reconfigure that. That is a very dangerous intersection. Many of you are familiar with it. Even driving it is a little crazy. So it's very dangerous today. So there are a lot of benefits to a lot of users by reorganizing that. And Jacobs has been looking at that. You can see the path would come up, turn, and come on through the neighborhood here, or you could take a hiking trail along the crest of the hill. Very important that this continues on past the bridge towards Westin. And there's a whole separate series of hiking trails down below, which very few people even know exist, which ought to be elevated. Here's just a quick sketch, just to say, there it is today, and wouldn't that be great if we could take that back, create, even there's enough room for separate facilities for pedestrians and cyclists if you want to go that route. And there's a lot of room to do a lot of good in that section. Okay, I'm moving quickly. Okay, so we've just flown across the turnpike, and we're looking back. We just came from there. The boathouse is right over there. Sorry about the running around, but I wanted to be able to look back. You can see you're coming up Evergreen to an underpass here. that's there, and then down the old Pigeon Hill Road alignment to, we don't know what to call this park, we'll call it Pigeon Hill Park down here. And then there are several key links here that connect you into the Westin area and all the land to the south. The underpass and the Pigeon Hill Path, the Charles Street Tunnel, which is kind of a scary place to be, but could be improved. The very important and critical link, we call it the boathouse. This used to be Riverside Road, actual roadway. We call it the Boathouse Bridge. And then we'll talk about the Depot Tunnel. 4 different critical links, and we'll just touch on each of those. There's Chris there on our walkabout back in warmer times, coming down the old Pigeon Hill Road. It's still there. We were surprised to find it behind the fence. You go and take a peek. You can't get there unless you have permission, but this is a phenomenal road. You can get to it, come up to the end of Evergreen. There's a gate. There's Pete Sutton there, a few other people from the agency, and then this is a underpass big enough to run a whole fleet of buses underneath it. It's very, very wide and very, very commodious. So we think there's tremendous potential here. Here's Ted looking down the trail. This is the view you have from up. You break out and you're looking right down the river. It's kind of remarkable. And then here's the old historic wall holding up the old Pigeon Hill Road. So we think that's a tremendous resource and will help unlock access to this. Now we're going to pop over to Charles Street Tunnel. A lot of you are familiar. This is Beth Isler, who is working with us from Jacobs, and they have looked at a lot of these key pieces. It's a very simple move here, and that is just simply to move this out and create enough room there for a multi-use path down below. You can narrow this down to a much narrower section. You can still accommodate two-way traffic. People will slow down and cross at a slower speed and a safer speed. So we think there's some easy moves here that would make things a lot better. Boathouse Bridge, we're thrilled that the Mass Department of Transportation has picked that project up and is moving forward with it. It's a separate project now. It was going to be sort of stuck a little bit in limbo for a while, maybe 10, 20 years. That's not the case anymore, thank you, Michael. And it's moving forward now in a separate track. You can ask him about that. It's a 25% design, that guy right there. I was thrilled to hear him talk about 16 feet of width on that. Really commodious, with a beautiful views upriver from there, looking at the old arched railroad bridge. So very important connection. Folks coming to the boathouse will be able to come from the other side, not just come in Charles Street. I think there's a lot of benefits by having this. It is the key link for full access in this whole system. Without that, yeah, things are kind of tough. So we're just talking about that. Now we're talking about the Depot Tunnel. Very important because you need both, because both allows you to get into the system of parks, loop around, and really have a local recreational benefit. Depot Tunnel was there 100 years ago. People would come here on the trolley, the train, they'd get off, they'd walk down the path with their kids or their sweetheart, and they'd be canoeing, 5 minutes later. It was the portal into this recreational area. It's H.H. Richardson building, it's long gone, sad to say, but what's remained is this somewhat dilapidated tunnel. It's structurally perfectly sound. It just needs to be restored, especially the approach to it. So we have a whole study that's been done by Jacobs Engineering. There's a relationship between MassDOT and DCR, MBTA. A lot of players are coming together to try to figure out how to restore this tunnel because it's a critical link. And frankly, a lot of people use this to get to the T. They actually walk along that path to get to the T. So it's not just recreation, it's actually transportation here. Now we're up in the air again, looking at this. We're just talking about the Depot Tunnel. Here's the Pigeon Hill Park. This is the bridge that gets you across the MWRA site around the edge. Every one of these projects is a story unto itself that Dan can tell you about. And then we're going to come down and take a look at the Pony Truss Bridge, which was restored part of the Accelerated Bridge Program a few years ago. It's a beautiful bridge, and then the Pony Truss Trail along the edge. Here's the Pony Truss Bridge. It's a gorgeous bridge. It's an historic bridge. It was fully restored. Beautiful job. And it just doesn't go anywhere at this end at this point. But we need to give this bridge a purpose again, bring the path down to it, so you can get into Riverside Park. We're not going to talk a lot about the parks per se. They need to have a lot of attention and focus on them. We as a group are looking at the connections right now. But we realize that's work that ought to be done. We ought to be thinking about those parks at some point to reimagine what they could be. Here's the Pony Trust Trail along the edge, and they're all coming back across Recreation Road now. This used to be 128, believe it or not, and then they rebuilt it over here, I was told, and I believe them. So this is the main trail coming across. You come across Michael's Bridge or back there at the boathouse. You can come along this road, and you can come up to the 2 railroad bridges, the other critical link in this whole regional system. And we'll talk about that in a second. You also continue on to Riverside Station. Riverside Station, of course, is the major station at the end of the Green Line. It makes this accessible to many, many people. It's a critical link to get you there. And then the Pony Trust Trail, of course, which is really a recreational, a hiking trail, will get you to the same place. By the way, people say, big plans, when are you getting anything done? Come on out. Join Ted this summer as we get the professional trail crew growing. We have a grant from the Recreational Trails Program to restore the Pony Trust Trail. And they will be out there, and we'll actually learn how to do this work with some volunteers along the way. So that's very exciting. And there's what's going on today. There's Amanda Lewis, who administers the Recreational Trails Grant Program, and she's been fantastic. And she's been directed and helped shepherd this project along, and we have a grant to work on that trail. As you all know, it's a big development that's proposed for the Riverside Station, and the developer has been very accommodating and has listened to our argument that this should have a very organic and convincing connection to these open space resources. They have sort of taken this internally and they're starting to think about that seriously from a design perspective. How does all of this is an earlier image? How does that connect in to this extraordinary open space system? And more importantly, how do folks come back and come through to the T, to the restaurants, and actually connect? It's a tremendous enhancement, actually, to be able to get off the trail and come out and get a cup of coffee, or hop on the Green Line and head back if you came out one way. So those discussions have been underway for a while. The 2 bridges. In a way, that's my involvement began because Dave Lutzenheiser introduced me to Ted Chapman back in the spring, and we're talking about these 2 bridges. If you could figure out how to make these, you can walk across them today, of course, but how to make them safe and accessible, that would be a tremendous benefit just immediately in terms of providing access from Lower Falls across to the parks to the other side. So a lot of attention has been paid to this. We have preliminary designs from the BSC group, and these are preliminary. They need to go forward into full designs. But we're very excited about the possibility, a whole new pavement, new design for the railings, and of course this is the connector road down below, and the need for very long ramps to connect you up and down off of those elevated bridges. It's complicated, but it can be done, and now we're much more confident that we can get that done. And then what happens after that? To the south and to the west, you have a huge amount of land that's used for golf, for cross-country skiing, for walking. A master planning process is starting up right now at the DCR. And if you have thoughts about how this land should be used, you should reach out to them. They'll be reaching out to you, I'm sure. And we think that it's possible to have trails through here, get people down to the river, and accommodate all the other uses that are happening today, and other uses that might happen in the future. This will evolve over time, but this is one of the great prizes. That first image you saw down low, looking across the marsh. It's an extraordinary resource. So we're close to the recap. You've been very patient. Now maybe you can figure out what this all is, because people look at plans and their eyes glaze over. But we just came down up on Lionsville. We came down Commonwealth Avenue. We looked at the crossings. We looked at the boathouse. We looked at the connections to Westin and to Norumbega Road, dancing around that name. Then through the neighborhoods on Evergreen underneath the overpass down into this first park, the tunnel through. We looked at the tunnel. We looked at the crossing here. This is the pathway along the Pony Trust Bridge Trail. The crossing into this park. That park, something should be done with that park. We don't know what yet. And then the main trail down across along Recreation Road back to the two railroad bridges. And of course, critically important to come into this area, however that happens, back to the T, so that people can get there from elsewhere in Newton and not come out to the green. You ought to be able to, just like you did 100 years ago, come out on the train, get off, walk down, and have a fabulous experience. Maybe you'll even go all the way down to here and go skiing. And then on down through the neighborhoods. We love the idea of being able to get down through here somehow on pathways that get you close to the river. It's also important to get back into the neighborhood and have access so they can get out from the streets out and across. And there's some images. And I think this is the slide. I just want to end with this. That's the same slide that Daniel ended with. These are the folks that we're working for. This is why we're doing it. We're not doing it because we love the asphalt and the trails. We love it. We're trying to do this so that these guys can get out and not only recreate, but connect with the river and have that experience, grow up with that connection to nature and to each other, frankly. It's a social experience as well. And that is a snail's oversight view through the trail, the different pieces of it. And if you haven't fallen asleep at your seats yet, we can run the video if you want to take a look at that. Okay, let's do that, and then we're going to finish up. Okay, you ready for a flight? We're starting in a very beautiful place.
This is the drone flight.
I'll narrate a little bit, but you've all seen this now, so you should understand how this works. And I just start.
Yep.
I need all the help I can get. I'll just point out a few things. I'm not going to narrate, not too much.
That area, the Lakes District is a 190-acre watershed. All the codes combined.
People looking for their homes.
These little dots sort of show more or less where the trail might go. So there's Lions Field. This is all Newton land, and that trail needs a little bit of work too. It needs to be widened and made more accessible, but it's there, and you can see it right there. Now this is where we had that first image, that screen capture that shows connecting path. All of that would become Greenway with connections across. Auburn Street coming in. There's Evergreen up there. Route 30. And that's the beginning of an extraordinary national road.
That nasty highway.
Yes. That's a beautiful thing.
Convenient when you need to go somewhere.
Bring back the canoes. There's the underpass right there. So you come through and then down this slope right here. There's the bridge that Michael.
Can you get rid of the cars?
Get yourself a mule. We're missing the tunnel, but it's right there, and they did already did some clearing of some old dead wood down below, and there's the Pony Trust Bridge. There's the big park that could be somewhat more than it is. Then we had to change because we're in a development area, and there are the two bridges. You can barely see them, but there they are. The connection through. Right there. Beautiful streets, and then coming down across this extraordinarily beautiful piece of land. I'm just going to let it go for a little bit because it's so pretty.
What time of the year was this taken?
Where are you?
Right there.
Right there.
Or when was it taken?
This was taken a year ago.
What month?
Oh, I didn't ask that. It looks like spring, spring to summer, I think. I'll have to look it up. You can see a few people.
Play their little golf course.
Look at as far as the bridge. I live over there. Don't tell anybody. And there's the bridge right there. That was also restored. State Council Pony, close to the State Council Pony Trust Bridge. And then this continues on. David's here. He's been urging us to think about connections further downstream. This is private land. It's a shame that we can't get access along here. Maybe we can. Beautiful stretches of river right there. The Lower Falls area, in the falls, and then there's some extraordinary connections further on. Then you're right into the old Mill District and the old waterfall.
Starbucks, we end up at Starbucks.
I neglected, as an elected official, you know, the drill as we recognize one another. I saw Allison Leary, City Councilor Allison Leary. I saw Susan Albright. I don't know if she's still here. Chris Markowitz. Well, Kay Khan, our state representative. Thank you so much for being here, Representative Khan. And other elected officials. Andrea Kelly, thank you so much for being here. Okay, thank you.
I imagine there may be a few people want to ask our guests some questions. And what I'm going to do just...
I have a concern about Nehampton Park. As a kayaker for over 3 decades, with the serenity, quiet beauty of kayaking along that area, and then we had the canoe and kayak service go into that area, and I'm very much supportive of having kids learn how to kayak, but it's become a tremendous problem with huge numbers of cars. You can't get your kayak into the one dock. The accessibility is a major problem. And it's turned away a lot of people, and this is a microcosm, a concern of what the quote that was made of maximizing access to the Charles River. There has to be a balance, and I applaud all that you've done, that there must be a continual look at the balance of what we're doing. Secondly, in the area where they had the bridge, a lot of families complained to me, you have to cross to the other side of Nehampton Street because there was no design of a path to go from one side of the Nehampton Park to the other side. It's incredibly dangerous. So those are 2 issues that I have amongst many that I'm concerned about in trying to reconcile recreation with development. Thank you.
I'll comment quickly on that. So, Nehampton Park, we're a little beyond what we've been showing tonight. Nehampton Park is down by Kendrick Street, and that has become a successful canoe launch to access DCR's Cutler Park, which is a really great paddling area. I wasn't quite aware of the big parking problem, but we'll look into that for you and see what we can work with the City of Newton to see what we might be able to do. There is unknown public parking on the other side of the street that looks like it's a commercial lot, but is actually open for public parking. especially on weekends, and maybe we could sign that better, and that might help alleviate some of your concerns.
But it's also a question of accessibility. There's so many people down there, hundreds of people at one time at one small dock.
Yeah.
And it's creating a lot, it creates a lot of safety issues also, getting in and access and outside. It's not a small little concern. There are, sometimes there are hundreds of people there on the weekends.
Right. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who has the microphone?
Is there any thought being given to building bike paths along Quinabuquin Road now that the sound wall is completed and made it a much pleasanter place?
The short answer is yes, and we actually were looking at that recently with some community advocates that live along the street, as well as I believe the local alderman was out there on that meeting. And so absolutely, we'd like to do two things out there. One, we want to get an appropriate shared use path along the river, do some land restoration where the cars have been driving over that parkland for years, including me when I was 17, and put in appropriate parking with guard railing to protect the land so that we can restore that parking.
Betsy Hewitt from Newton Upper Falls, and I worked on the Greenway that has been built on an old railroad bed, along with local work volunteers, and it's very successful. But one thing I learned is that it's not just the T where we got a 99-year lease, but also that some of the stumbling blocks are working with other towns, so how to kind of leverage, because our Greenway could have connected to Needham and Dover, except that Needham was didn't want to work on it. So as I see, my question is, as I see the development at Northland, they're very proud of the fact that we built this Greenway and they see it as a positive. But they brag about how the water goes into a stream that's right on their property, which is underground, and goes right into the Charles River. So I'm wondering, as we're making our plans in the city of Newton, are we making sure that we're all working together to both protect the resources as they are today or improve them, and that the DOT and Recreation is working together?
I think what you're getting at, the answer is yes. We are working together collaboratively. I mean, on all of our consultant teams, when we design these corridors, we always have, we usually require a staff ecologist to look closely at the ecology and the opportunities to strengthen the ecology for the living system. And we obviously look at water quality issues and compliance with best management practices for all the stormwater issues as well. We rarely do a project where the water ends up not being cleaner that's going in, whether it's a stream or an adjacent wetland resource area. So absolutely is the answer.
Let me just add to that. The new Mass Trails program has been an interdepartmental effort. It started at the governor's office, and Michael's connected with that and driving it, and so was Dan and others. And that is an indication of the interdepartmental, the interagency commitment to Greenways. And I tell you, without those folks getting on board and saying, yes, go, we wouldn't be doing this. So I think there's hope for much better coordination in the future. And also, it's a role for the advocates and for partners such as ourselves, because we get to cross over all kinds of boundaries and talk to all kinds of people and get them get them in the room together. So it's one of the roles of advocates to do that. So thank you for that question.
I'm just going to give the example of the I-90 project, which people might be following. There were several designs that were proposed originally in terms of what that would look like, the viaduct being rebuilt, et cetera, et cetera. And just to emphasize what Herb said, the role of advocates was really central, including Charles River Watershed Association, Charles River Conservancy, Walk Boston, Livable Streets. And we were really pleased, now I'm saying we as a CRWA executive director, with the final design that was chosen by Stephanie Pollock, Ward 2 resident, Ward 2 pride right there. And part of the advocacy, the very strong advocacy, was if we do this right, we can restore a lot of parkland, we can actually restore the riverbank, and get much better water quality as in addition to recreation. I don't know that necessarily the decision that we think is best would have come about without very strong advocacy. So with all due respect to my friends in government, absolutely, we always, including folks who are advocating to me as a city councilor, it is always good to be advocating, and don't assume that the right decisions will happen without that advocacy.
Looking at the Leo J, and I might have missed it, but you mentioned lots of different bridges, but in terms of accessing the whole Leo J for trails, as well as with the skiing, I know we've got that one little bridge that's in a little bit of disrepair, which the cars travel over. I can't remember the name of it. As you're approaching from Newton, what? Yeah, as you're approaching from Newton Lower Falls up to the Charles River Water Association, are there any plans to build, construct, or restore any other bridges across the Charles within the Leo J area so we can access more of those trails within there without having to go over that one bridge of the road?
Well, there's a master planning process that's getting underway right now, and it's a good question, and frankly, it should be put to them. Is there a need for another pedestrian bridge? They're very expensive things, as you can imagine, but there are places where you can imagine they would be enhanced access tremendously. So that whole issue of public access along the shore, threading its way through this golf course in a way that's not hazardous, all of that will be looked at very carefully. I'm not aware of any specific plans for any specific bridges beyond the big pieces of infrastructure we're looking at right now, just to get there. So.
My name is Dick Bale, Ward 2. And I just want to express a very deep and sincere thank you to the work that you guys have done. It's been a huge gift to the community. I've used the river in one way or another over 40 years, so from bad to good. I've come to believe that it was the best commute to work that anybody could have from Newton into Cambridge. I've used the river for bicycling, for running, for cross-country skiing, for ice skating in Auburndale Cove, for kayaking and canoeing, and what a way to start and end my day. It's just a terrific gift. I have one small question, which is about the East Coast Greenway and how you're going to link into that.
David, what do you got?
David, do you want to come up front?
East Coast Greenway,
David
what's going on with it?
Loutzheimer, walk up.
Well, I'll comment quickly and then David can follow. The East Coast Greenway is, as a group, they don't really design and build trails the way we all do. So often we end up labeling our trails part of the East Coast Greenway, which is why sometimes along the Charles River, you'll see the little triangular signs, East Coast Greenway. So they're really a group that is promoting and advocating for a continuous network along the entire eastern region. And it's often others that are actually getting the trails done, and then they work collaboratively with us to integrate it into their big vision for this long distance trail, which is coming together pretty well. In fact, they want the Blackstone that I talked about to be part of that, so it goes all across the state.
Dan builds them, and then we put our signs on them.
Hi, my name is Scott Oran. Thank you so much for coming this evening.
I actually regularly ride my bike down Common Avenue and along the river, and every week, even last week when we had a mild day, I think this is really a magical place, and it's a real gift, so thank you. I also have been one of many people in Newton who've been talking about what I call the Commonwealth Bikeway. So I was very happy to see you converting asphalt to a bikeway at the end, but this is a very low cost as opposed to some of the more ambitious plans you have, way to create in Newton instantly 6 miles of bikeway separated with nothing more than road paint and street signs. And more ambitiously, if we could ever convince Boston to follow the lead of Newton, we'd have 12 miles from 128, and then farther, obviously, if you continue to your connection, all the way into the city, which would be very exciting. My question for you is, when do you get started?
Well, this is a complicated series of connections, and some of them have started already. Michael's got 25% design done on one of those bridges. A key piece for Newton, and here we are in Newton, is Commonwealth Avenue. That's going to be a heavy lift for this town. We're excited. We're going to be at Town Hall on Monday to represent this work. And I think it's going to take a lot of advocacy from a lot of people to say this is a priority, and we want to see that road made safer, and we want to make it safer for drivers and safer for pedestrians and cyclists. So that's key. I would say that's a key piece, and when we get started is when you get started. That's the answer to that question.
I just to echo what Herb said, it really has started. I mean, not only the Pony Trust Bridge, but the entire Riverside parking lot was restored in partnership again with DOT. And in addition, as many of you know, from Concord Ave out to Route 16, that section of the rail corridor has been restored, and the bridge over the river was restored, and that's really a critical piece connecting ultimately to Quinnipiquin Road, which already came up. And while I have you all here, I think I'd announce right now, we just awarded today, the DCR awarded a project on Heron Palm Parkway from Beacon Street to Route 9 to take 2 lanes of road out and put bike lanes and sidewalks.
David Lotson-Measure with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. We're the regional planning agency for the Boston area, and we talked about. I can't top Dan's announcement right here. I mean, that's the best on Hamilton Parkway. But you know, it was mentioned in a previous question about the East Coast Greenway. That's just one sort of corridor. But we've got a vision for over 1,000 miles of Greenway networks throughout the Metro Boston region. And the Charles River is just one of those. Herb mentioned the Aqueduct Trail System, which is 68 miles of 3 different networks. We're looking at what they call the Boston Greenbelt Trail, which is a hiking trail that's 88 miles circling inside 128. That includes some of the Charles River paths and the paths we talked about today, and connects the Fells, the Blue Hills, Glenwoods, and all the conservation land, and I've got that all mapped out. And a number of different corridors that all connect together, so that you know, wherever you live, that within a mile, half a mile of your house, you can jump on this greenway and go in all directions. And then we just sort of, with the Charles River, we hit some of that. And finally, I just want to mention that, it was touched upon a little bit that, we started with Dan talking about from Watertown, and then her coming around to Upper Falls, but now let's connect it all the way to Culver Park, which is the next step. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Nicole Freeman. I work for the City of Newton as Director of Transportation Planning. That was actually, in 10 years of working in the government, that was one of the best presentations I've ever seen. So thank you all. Yes. As many of you know, that's probably not that competitive, though. So I just want to say they are coming in to present on Monday to a number of city staff. And we're very excited to start to work with you. I think this is a great example of how some projects like this really do need local residents and like Ted and advocates like Herb to envisioned something where we might never have even seen it. I mean, when you think of that area, I'm not sure anyone realized that you really could connect and what was all there. And I think it was hours of digging through the woods and probably a few bouts of poison ivy to get to this point. So thank you all, and we look forward to working with you and hopefully making it a reality.
Hi, I'm Susan Albright, Councilor from Ward 2 in Newton. I just wanted to say that I have an interest with my off-leash dog group that Ted Kukunski knows about. There's a dilapidated part of Norumbega Park right near the Marriott that we wanted to restore and make it into more of a part of the park, but make it for off-leash dogs. And by way of accomplishing this, I had a conversation with the DPW Director of Transportation. And he said, I want to take that stretch of Commonwealth Avenue, which is a high-speed area, and I want to restore it. So I wanted you to know that we have interest in Newton for doing that work. And, you know, I have an interest in making an area for people to park to go to the off-leash dog park. But he has a real serious interest in getting rid of that strip of high-speed carriage lane. So if we can work together on that right away, that would be terrific.
That's fantastic. And I know that the operators of the hotel, we had initial conversations about the possibility of parking supply and providing some parking. So there's a lot of pieces that have to come together to make a dog park successful. So let's talk.
Hi, my name is Tamara Bliss. I love this presentation. I would urge you to add one group that was missing from all your photos, and that is these greenways are wonderful for people getting old who walk with canes and walk with walkers and with wheelchairs. I have taken people with all those different kinds of equipment, and it's a little hard sometimes because of the bikes, and it would be great to have maybe some trails that were just only for walking. But you know, the city of Newton is at least now 25% going to 30 to 35% over 65. And those of us who used to do all those very active things, some of us can't do it anymore. And it's another plus, and I'd just love to see you change your pictures. And then I want to give a shout out that Rita Baron, who I knew, did her original work as a volunteer with the League of Women Voters and began to look at the quality of the water, and then eventually started the Charles River Watershed Association, and she was in the Newton League.
Last summer, my husband and I went down to Waltham and rented stand-up paddleboards and paddleboarded ourselves all the way up to Norumbega Park, and we were astonished at how amazing the river was and how difficult it was to find a landing spot at the park for a boat. It was practically impossible. So it would be really lovely to have this kind of grand plan and bring that back again. And of course, then we paddleboarded back to Waltham. So, and I just did want to share that there are a group of us who have been working on improving the carriage road for walkers and bikers and to make it a greenway. And there's some tenuous designs, and we've been working with Nicole a little bit, and it would really great if we could all partner together so and hook up with your plans.
A quick comment on that. We do have a long-standing plan, which I'm trying to get to restore the Norumbega duck feeding area and to make it a actual boat launch area for public boat launches.
Yeah, great.
So we're working on that, and that would help a lot, both alleviate the Nahanton Road problem by having a secondary place to put in for the public. It's not in the rental area, so that would help a lot with that problem.
We also found that after, you can't really carry too much on the stand-up paddleboard, and after hours, the long time it took to get there in the heat, there was no place to get refreshments or water or anything, and then we had to go back. So it'd be nice to have, just make it a nicer area again.
Tamara said one of the things I was going to say, and acknowledge Rita Baron's role in envisioning some of the things that are happening today and are going to happen in the future. but for 77 years, the Charles River has been a very focal part of my personal life, starting with going regularly, almost every weekend I was in town to Normbego, we called it. And I have been working with the league. I'm the transportation person for the Mass League of Women Voters, and I've worked with Jane on her plans about making the Commonwealth Avenue carriageway more reasonable. I think that this is very, very exciting. It has taken years for people to do some of the things that you're going to do now, and Dan in particular has been very involved in making it possible. And he doesn't not acknowledge that, but he doesn't give himself enough credit for how important he's been in this process. And I just want to say that I've never seen such a large group in this room before.
Just as a cyclist who enjoys these trails very much and has biked on many of them, my concern is surface. Some of the bike trails around. Try that. Yeah, much better. As a cyclist, one of my concerns is the surface. Some of the bike trails around here are done in this gravel stuff, very fine gravel, and you can't really ride on it on a road bike. So I'm wondering whether the bike paths are all going to be paved, or if some of them you're planning something else.
As far at DCR and DOT, we're pretty much committed to using two primary materials. One is asphalt. The other is called stabilizer, which is the pathway material you see near the Blue Heron Bridge. That does, with proper upkeep, you can bike on it pretty safely. It's ADA compliant for wheelchairs. We typically would only use that material in a really sensitive environmental area. Otherwise, we would tend to go with asphalt.
I just wanted to give a shout out to the Charles River Watershed, the canoe and kayak group, and legislators for keeping the Charles River free of the non-native vegetation. So we have worked very hard with the local groups and also with all of our colleagues in this area to get money in the state budget. So I just want to make sure people understand that that there is a need to do that, and we've been doing that year after year because otherwise the non-native vegetation would really take over the area of the cove, and then it could work its way down the river. So there's a lot of effort that's gone into that. So I just wanted to mention that as one of the issues.
And thank you for all the work you've done to make these bridges happen. And
I love the river, I live on the river, but just a question about one of the pictures that was up there and referring to the area as the duck feeding area. The idea that you're encouraging people to feed the geese and the ducks, not great.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's a historic duck feeding area that was part of the larger Norumbega Park. We have put signage over there, and rather than just saying do not feed the birds, which is ideal, we've tried to encourage people to only feed them with the right food sources and to only feed them in winter when they don't have natural food sources. So we're trying to at least curb it from people sitting there with 2 loaves of Wonder Bread.
Speaking of the wildlife coming back, the loaves of Wonder Bread, I've noticed these gigantic turtles that people come down to feed when I'm biking up the Newton side of the Charles.
They're snapping turtles.
But they're huge.
Yeah, they are. They can be 2 foot diameter.
Well, no, these are bigger. Their heads are as big as human heads. Where did they come from? And people are feeding them whole loaves of bread.
Alice and Larry. I want to give a little shout out to the wildlife as well.
because I think that's also part of the pleasure I get when I'm going biking or walking along the river. I'm very fortunate to be right along the stretch along California Street, which is a favorite walking path for me. And just a couple of weeks ago, there's a adult bald eagle just sitting on the ice right in front of the Marriott Hotel, in front of the boathouse, which is an increasingly much more common sight. And when we're thinking about restoration, I think we should also be thinking about homes and areas for wildlife and also for mitigating the impacts of climate change. And I want to say I've really enjoyed this, and I thank you so much for all the work that's been going on. It's been great.
Appreciate that. On the wildlife, because it really was central to our passion of restoring the river corridor. There's a guy in Newton, many of you may know, Richard Premack, he's a BU ecology professor, and he's written some of the definitive ecology guides for the country for teaching college kids. He's actually had 2 students get their master's thesis studying the restored river in Newton, Watertown, and Waltham as one of the few areas that's a true restored natural ecosystem. And he's shown in one of the master theses they did that the plant material, all the native stuff we put in there, was growing actually more successfully than in a wild environment. So it was a real success story based on some of the research that Richard helped us do.
More phosphorus.
So I just,
a lot of nutrients.
So I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to respect the fact that the custodian needs to clean up. This seems like we should reconvene in a year and talk about next 6 months. We should reconvene in 6 months and talk about next steps. I really appreciate everybody coming out. And there's information on the back table on how to get in touch with us. And if you cannot find other information, bitenewton.org. I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay, thank you again.